All right, we are back. Welcome back to the other side of complexity. And before I jump in, the title of this post is We're Back, Second Drafts. And before I jump in, I just want to make a couple of notes just explaining where this is coming from and who it's going to. So this is a post I have written for my Substack newsletter. And I've decided that I'm going to publish an audio version of that so you can listen right in from the Substack app. So Substack listeners, welcome. But I'm also going to post a copy of this post, a video version of this post to YouTube. So hello, YouTube. Hello, people that are watching on YouTube. For those of you who don't know, I run a Substack newsletter that I haven't really been tending to, which I'm going to get to in this post. And what I'm going to do today is really just like read through the post so people who want to listen can have that option. But I'm also going to kind of talk extemporaneously on things. So it's going to be a bit more content than what was in the original post. So here we go. So I apologize for keeping you waiting. In late 2023, this newsletter launched. I launched it with the intent to offer regular writing on a range of topics, including leadership, complexity, dialogue, conflict, and the emergent issues of what I and many people are calling the meta crisis, like the underlying crisis of existential and catastrophic risk that's driving all the other crises. Around the time I launched the newsletter, I also received a series of existential threats of my own, life-threatening health diagnoses that I simply had to attend to. So I haven't been producing content regularly at all for the last year. It's been very intermittent. This is the first piece that I'll have published on the Substack app in over a year. So I published something right before one of my major surgeries last year, and then haven't been back since. So today I'm posting to share that this is about to change. So please watch this space and expect to see the other side of complexity showing up more regularly in your mailbox or in your Substack app starting this week. And if you're following on YouTube, more posts related to what's happening on Substack, what I'm writing about on YouTube. But first, I just want to share a little bit about where I have been for the last year. So the last 16 months have been filled with disruption and surprises. It all started one night in November of 2023 when I went to an emergency room at a hospital near me because of some pain I was experiencing. I thought maybe I had kidney stones because I'd had that before, and it's what it felt like. They sent me for a CAT scan. They didn't see any cause of the pain. There were no kidney stones or anything else that would be causing the pain, but what they did see was an unruptured aortic aneurysm in my abdomen. A couple of months later, I learned about a second aneurysm on my aortic root, and then I learned that both of those things were caused by an underlying genetic connective tissue disorder that's been in my family for at least a few generations. So I suddenly had what felt like a new full-time job, just managing all of the tests and appointments and research about the condition, and eventually underwent 2 major surgeries while many of the people in my family were also getting screened for the condition and in some cases undergoing their own treatment for the exact same thing. So it's been a tough year. Through my diagnosis, I found a lot of answers to some health mysteries that I had been seeking resolution for most of my life. So aneurysms are like the most life-threatening consequence of living with a connective tissue disorder. But the generator problem, if you can think of it as like there's the gene and then there's the like symptomatic problems of the disorder. The generator problem between the gene and like where the problems show up is your body can't synthesize collagen properly. So most of us eat collagen in the meats and other foods we consume. And then our bodies sort of take it apart, send it wherever, and then put it back together again. And my body struggles with that. So when my body tries to put collagen together, it comes out sort of like not quite perfect. I think of it as sort of like a counterfeit collagen disorder. The collagen proteins that I have are different and stretchier than normal collagen. And in veins and arteries, this causes elasticity, which leads to aneurysms. So, but collagen is in pretty much all the body's tissues. So many body systems are affected. Injuries like pulled muscles can happen more easily, and it can take harder to heal from those or recover from those incidents. I've lived with chronic pain for like most of my more beyond my adult life, like well into my teenage years, since my teenage years. And what I've come to learn in the last year has like helped me understand why I've had so much pain, why I've had other health issues that I haven't been able to place a cause for. And I've come to learn more about sort of the long-term prospects for people living with my condition. I'll share more about that at some point, but not today. So now where I'm at is I just had my most recent surgery 17 days ago. So I've been, I spent a few days in hospital recovering. I spent a few days at my sister's home, but a week at my sister's recovering. And then I've been here at my place in Halifax for a little over a week. So I will still be recovering for a while. I don't have a ton of energy right now. It kind of feels like I've just been stabbed in the stomach, even though surgery was weeks ago. But I do have the energy to write, and I do have the energy to make content like this. But if I sound a little out of breath, I am. It's hard to take deep breaths. Beyond having the energy to write, like I am thrilled to be alive. And, you know, the two surgeries I underwent were high risk surgeries. So having this in mind, when I woke up in the recovery room both times, and especially so this most recent time, like my actual first thought was simply like, I get to keep going. Like I get to keep moving. I get to keep living. And I thought about some of the people that are closest to me, and thought kind of transformed to like, we get to keep doing this. Like we get to keep creating together. We get to keep building together, working together, playing together. And I'm thrilled to reclaim this project because I had a lot of energy to work on this project before shit hit the fan. And I've thought about it pretty much every day as I've been navigating this, and I wanted to have the energy. I wanted to have the capacity to work on it, but my life just wasn't stable enough. So I'm really eager to get back to this now that I don't have like an imminent threat over my head. And at the same time, it's been a strange time for someone to sort of like come back to life for me anyways. It's been the world is filled with uncertainty. Maybe it's because I've been like sitting in a recovery bed, reading the news, watching the world through a screen, consuming more of it than usual, but it looks sad out there. And so I just want to name that there's those two things. Like on the one hand, it's like I am thrilled to keep living. I'm not ashamed that I am. And the state of the world is like, it's hard times. So what can you expect from this newsletter, from this program, from this podcast, depending on how you're consuming it, in the coming days and weeks? Short answer is I have writing to share. The writing falls into a couple of categories, which I'm sure will shift and expand as new issues emerge. And I will tell you about those two categories. One of them I've already told you about, but I'm going to share a bit more. So the first category is reflections on the health journey that I've been on. I've shared some of this writing with my friends already, with people who kind of are friends with me on socials. So what you'll get in this newsletter is really a second draft of that writing. And my intention in writing about my health journey has been really just to make sense of the experience that I've been through, first for myself, and then in sharing it initially I started sharing it thinking like, I just want other people to know what I'm going through, so that, when we run into one another in public, I don't have to explain it, that kind of thing. But it turns out that sharing how I have been making sense of my own experiences has, according to other people who have told me, helped them make sense of their own experiences, not necessarily of health issues, just but like people navigating hard things in general. And then hearing from them helps me make more sense of my own experiences. So this has just been like a beautiful reminder that sense making, understanding what things mean, it's a group project, and we need one another to make sense of our lives. So I'm going to be writing about some of what I've learned, what I've reflected on in my health journey. And also just like really claiming that, role of sense making and sense maker. And that's something I hope we can do here together. So the second topic, is, I've titled it in the newsletter, Evolving Canadian Nationalism. So as you may know, Canada, the country I live in, is being threatened with annexation by the American president. This has created something of a resurgence of Canadian nationalism, some degree of solidarity in our politics and our economy. But from my perspective, that unity will inevitably and is already starting to splinter. So I have just like a handful of thoughts that I wanted to put out there today to sort of like share where I'm coming from on this topic and how I'm intending to engage with it, where my starting point is. So here I've got 4 of them, so I'm just going to talk through them. I'm going to be integrating these into my writing. I don't really have a claim of what any of this means yet, but that's what we're going to work through together. Thought number 1. So over the last 2 decades in Canada, the degree of polarization in Canadian politics has been increasing. And none of the events of the last 6 weeks have addressed the core drivers of polarization. And when we think about polarization, we can think about it as there's like healthy, holistic polarization, and then degenerative, destructive polarization. Healthy, holistic polarization would be sort of like if you think of the North and South poles. That is a healthy, holistic polarization. It doesn't tear the earth apart. You could think of the polarization between neutrons, protons, and electrons. That is a healthy kind of polarization that keeps the atom together. Destructive polarization is, I think of as it, in politics, it looks like that's what happens when people start to hate their political opponents, make harsh judgments about them based on, if you know one thing about what they stand for. Like say if you know somebody is opposed to or in favor of a controversial topic like abortion, there's this thing that happens where we sort of like develop a sense of that means all of these other things about what that person believes. We develop a whole understanding of that person's worldview, which isn't necessarily true. But fundamentally, destructive polarization is polarization that is not happening within the context of a united whole. It's happening with at least the impact of destroying the whole. And I see that as part of what's happening in Canadian politics. It's been happening for a couple decades, if not longer. It's an issue I worked on, studied, tried to learn as much as I could about over the last decade and a half. And I fail to see how this crisis resolves that issue in any kind of permanent or sustained way. And I can see many ways how polarization could actually render us rather impotent as a nation in terms of fighting off threats to our sovereignty. So that's top of mind. Second thought, nationalism is already being used to justify things that reasonable Canadians disagree on. Things like removing environmental protections or red tape, as some like to call it. In the case of my province, this is definitely happening where our government is reintroducing introducing legislation that would remove bans on things like fracking and uranium mining. Not issues that I know a terrible amount about, but they're not revisiting the logic that caused the ban in the first place. They're saying, because nationalism, end the ban on uranium mining, end the ban on fracking, because we need energy security. And while I certainly agree that we need energy security, that's not a conscious way of making a decision. There surely are ways to integrate that kind of the wisdom from earlier policies, from earlier legislation, into what we're going through now, because doing the opposite is devolution, right? So in combination with this, governments, including my own here in Nova Scotia, are using the crisis that we're facing, using the flag of nationalism to dismantle some of the democratic guardrails that provide checks and balances on that government, because, as they would say, they need to make decisions more quickly. I don't think that makes us a stronger whole. So that's one of the topics I'll explore in the writing that's coming up in the coming days. Third thing I'm thinking about is retaliation. Retaliation doesn't make sense in any conflict situation. In the case of the trade war that's happening, retaliation from Canadians, from Canadian governments on Americans I don't see how it benefits our citizens, and it certainly doesn't benefit American citizens. And what we know retaliation does very, very well is that it escalates conflict. It doesn't de-escalate it. The fourth point is simply that fear-based nationalism born out of a response or a reaction to an external threat, is not the same as patriotic love. Love of country, because somebody is attacking us, is a different kind of love than love of country because don't we fit well together? Isn't it awesome what's happening here? Isn't it great to be Canadian? Those are different things. So, and at the same time, we are being threatened. So we have to do something. And to me, this is inviting us. There's an option here to move into a conversation about what conscious nationalism might mean. So a set of questions that I'm exploring on this topic are these ones. One, what would a conscious, evolved form of Canadian nationalism involve and include? Question two, what does it mean to reclaim our identity as Canadians consciously? What does it mean to reclaim our Canadian identity consciously? And I say reclaim because I think a lot of us, the last several Canada days, a lot of people, myself included, have been kind of reluctant to celebrate our Canadianity, in part because of what we've learned about the history of our nation and the terrible things that the founders of this nation did to the Indigenous inhabitants of this land. And I think when we talk about reclaiming Canadian identity, I think what we're talking about is, or what I'm talking about, what I'm asking about when I'm putting this question out there, what would it mean to reclaim our Canadian identity consciously? I think part of that is claiming the label, claiming the flag, claiming the anthem, and also claiming responsibility for the legacy. We get to be Canadian. And part of what means to belong to a nation is to take responsibility for the nation and the national interest. And I wonder if this is not an opportunity to just become more conscious of what that legacy means and how to live as an integrated whole with not just people within the nation, but like within a global whole, which is where the next question comes in. So the last question I have is, what does it mean to be a Canadian in a world facing a growing number of catastrophic and existential threats, where it's not just Canadian sovereignty that's being threatened, but it's like planetary sovereignty that's being threatened? What does that look like? And I think Canada has a good head start on that question. And it's worth exploring further. So those are the two topics I'm writing about now. And my intent is to just follow the thread, to keep moving, to evolve, whatever insights come out of the writing on those topics. Those are further threads that we can continue to explore in this space. And the writing I've prepared is stuff that I've already posted in a lot of cases other places, in some cases stuff that I've spoken about on my YouTube channel, and then in other cases just they're conversations I've been having with friends. So I'm thinking of it as like these are second drafts that I'll be sharing with you, and there will be some one-off pieces that are unrelated to these topics, pieces on things like creativity, leadership, and music, other interests of mine. So one of the reasons I started this project was because I had failed to find a place where the conversation I want to have here now was happening. I would bring my ideas to other people's conversations and other people's meetings. I would, look for something that was like close to what I wanted to do, but ultimately I couldn't find it. And the conclusion I reached is like the conversation I want to have is what I'm going to have to start. So I hope you'll engage in the conversation. Drop a note in the comments. Let me know where you're listening from, how what I'm sharing hits you, and stay tuned.